That worthless girl shouldn't even touch something so sacred. The words hit Maya like a physical blow, cutting through the morning air of the temple with cruel precision. She felt them settle into the familiar hollow space in her chest, where all such declarations lived, each one a confirmation of what everyone already knew. She was nothing, less than nothing. Maya kept her eyes fixed on the ancient moon relic in her hands, the ornate crystal pendant catching the early light streaming through the temple's stained glass windows. The sacred artifact pulsed with a soft silver glow, its surface warm against her palms despite the morning chill. She had been cleaning it since before dawn, as she did every day, polishing away dust and fingerprints from the ceremonies where important wolves would touch it during their rituals. Important wolves, never her. "I don't know why they even let her near it," another voice added, dripping with disdain. "Everyone knows she's defective. No wolf, no worth." Maya's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around the relic, but she forced herself to remain perfectly still, invisible. That was her survival strategy, perfected over 18 years of existing at the very bottom of the pack hierarchy. If she didn't react, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break, maybe they would grow bored and move on to more entertaining targets. The temple filled with the sounds of preparation for tonight's bonding ceremony, where unmated wolves would be paired according to rank and political necessity. Maya would not be participating. She never did. The monthly ceremonies were for wolves who mattered, who had something to offer their future mates. Strength, beauty, bloodline, power. Maya had none of these things. "At least she's useful for menial labor," Selena's voice cut through the chatter, smooth and poisonous. Maya didn't need to look up to know the pack princess stood in the doorway, resplendent in ceremonial silks that cost more than Maya's yearly food allowance. Selena was everything Maya was not, golden-haired, wolf-blessed, destined for greatness. Though I suppose even cleaning is generous work for someone so fundamentally broken. The cruel laughter that followed made Maya's face burn with shame, but she continued her careful polishing of the relic. Its silver light seemed to pulse brighter under her touch, almost as if responding to her emotions, but that was impossible. Sacred relics responded only to wolves of power and bloodline. Maya had neither. "Speaking of useful," Selena continued, her voice taking on a note of anticipation that made Maya's skin crawl, "I should prepare for tonight. The Alpha King arrives this afternoon for tomorrow's ceremony. When he claims me as his mate, this entire territory will be elevated beyond anything you small minds can imagine." Maya had heard the whispers, the excited speculation. Alpha King Damon was coming to cement a political alliance through mating with Selena, uniting their territories under his rule. It was a match that made perfect sense. Selena was powerful, beautiful, politically valuable, everything a king would need in a queen. The other pack members dispersed to prepare for the ceremony, leaving Maya alone with their casual cruelty echoing in the empty temple. She finally allowed herself to breathe, her shoulders sagging slightly as the tension left her body. This was her world. This was what she knew. But as she held the moon relic up to catch the light, examining it for any remaining imperfections, something strange happened. The crystal's silver glow intensified, and for just a moment Maya could have sworn she felt something stir deep inside her chest. Not her heart, not her lungs, but something else entirely. Something that had been sleeping so long she had forgotten it existed. The sensation vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving Maya staring at the now normal relic in confusion. She shook her head, dismissing the moment as wishful thinking. Broken girls didn't have mysterious stirrings. They had duty and quiet endurance and the small comfort of staying unnoticed. Maya returned to her cleaning, unaware that in a few short hours her carefully constructed invisible world would shatter completely. The Alpha King was coming, and with him everything she thought she knew about herself would change forever. The morning sun climbed higher, casting longer shadows through the temple windows, and somewhere in the distance the sound of approaching hoofbeats began to echo across the territory. The ceremony preparations continued around her, but Maya remained focused on her work, polishing the relic that would soon reveal truths neither she nor anyone else was prepared for. She was no longer the girl who believed she was nothing, though she didn't know it yet. The sacred arena had not seen a formal challenge in over a century. Maya stood at the edge of the ancient stone circle, silver light pulsing from her skin in rhythm with her heartbeat, as she surveyed the massive crowd that had gathered to witness what would either be her coronation or her death. Every wolf in the territory was present, along with representatives from neighbouring lands who had come to see if the rumours of the Moon Crown's return were true. They would not leave disappointed. "Are you certain about this?" Damon asked quietly, his golden eyes reflecting concern despite his faith in her abilities. "Selena has been training for combat her entire life. You've had your powers for less than a week." Maya turned to face him, and he saw something in her silver gaze that made his wolf sit up and take notice. Not fear or uncertainty, but the cold calculation of a predator who had already decided how the hunt would end. "I have been training my entire life," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Every day of cruelty, every moment of survival, every hour of learning to endure, it was all preparation for this moment." The truth of those words settled into her bones like armour. She wasn't the untested girl who had discovered her power in a moment of panic. She was the culmination of 18 years of learning to fight with nothing but will and stubborn refusal to break. Now she had the strength to match her spirit, and the combination was devastating. Elder Thorn's voice carried across the arena as he began the formal ritual. "By ancient right and sacred law, Maya of the Moon Crown has issued challenge for leadership of this territory and the right to mate with Alpha King Damon. The challenge has been accepted by Selena, daughter of Alpha Marcus. Let the trial by combat commence." A hush fell over the crowd as both women stepped into the arena. Selena moved with predatory grace, her golden hair braided back for battle and her muscled form speaking of years of dedicated training. She was magnificent, Maya had to admit, everything a wolf warrior should be. But Maya was something else entirely. "I should have killed you when you were still weak," Selena called out, beginning to circle Maya like a hunting cat. "I should have recognized the threat you represented and ended it before you could poison the Alpha King's mind with whatever witchcraft you used to ensnare him." "The only poison here," Maya replied, matching Selena's circular movement with fluid ease, "is the hatred that has consumed your soul. You cannot stand the thought that someone you deemed worthless proved to be your superior in every way that matters." Selena's perfect control cracked, and she launched herself across the arena with a snarl of pure fury. Her shift was flawless, golden wolf form emerging mid-leap with claws extended for Maya's throat. Maya didn't dodge. Instead, she met Selena's charge head-on, her own transformation flowing like liquid silver. Her massive wolf form collided with Selena's in the centre of the arena, and the impact sent shockwaves through the stone beneath their feet. But where Selena had expected to overpower her smaller opponent through superior training and technique, she instead found herself grappling with something that defied every law of physics she understood. Maya's silver wolf was not just larger than expected. It was stronger, faster, and moved with an ancient grace that spoke of centuries of accumulated knowledge. The ancestral voices rose in Maya's mind like a battle hymn. "Show her what the Moon Crown is capable of, little queen. Show her why we ruled when the world was young." Power flowed through Maya's wolf form like molten metal, enhancing every movement, every strike, every defensive maneuver. When Selena's claws raked across her flank, the wounds closed almost instantly, silver light sealing torn flesh with supernatural efficiency. When Selena tried to use her superior weight to pin Maya to the ground, she found herself thrown aside with contemptuous ease. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Maya systematically dismantled Selina's every advantage. Years of training meant nothing against centuries of inherited wisdom. Careful preparation crumbled before the raw power of a bloodline that had been forged in the crucible of divine favour. Maya could have ended the fight quickly, could have gone for Selina's throat and finished her rival with a single devastating bite. But something held her back. Not mercy exactly, but a deeper understanding of what this moment represented. This wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about proving to herself and everyone watching that she had truly left her old life behind. The girl who had accepted cruelty as her due was dead. The woman who stood in her place was someone who chose when to show mercy, not someone who begged for it. Selina, bloodied and exhausted, made one final desperate lunge for Maya's exposed side. It was the opening Maya had been waiting for. She caught Selina's wolf form in mid-air, silver light blazing from her fur like captured starfire. For a moment they hung suspended above the arena floor, predator and prey frozen in perfect balance. Then Maya threw Selina down with enough force to crack the ancient stones. Selina hit the ground hard and didn't get up. Her wolf form flickered and dissolved, leaving her in human shape, gasping and broken on the arena floor. Blood stained her golden hair, and her blue eyes were wide with the shock of absolute defeat. Maya shifted back to human form and stood over her fallen rival, silver light still pulsing from her skin in slow waves. She could have spoken words of triumph, could have delivered some cutting remark about hubris and its consequences. Instead, she extended her hand. "Yield," she said simply. Selina stared at the offered hand for a long moment, pride warring with pragmatism in her battered features. Then, slowly, she reached up and grasped Maya's fingers. "I yield," she whispered, and the words carried clearly across the silent arena. The roar that went up from the crowd was deafening. Maya felt their approval, their awe, their recognition of what she had become, wash over her like a tide of golden light. But it was Damon's reaction that mattered most, the fierce pride and deep love that flowed through their mate bond, warming her from the inside out. Elder Thorn stepped into the arena, his ancient voice carrying the weight of ritual and tradition. "The challenge is decided. Maya of the Moon Crown has proven her worth through trial by combat. By right of birth and strength of victory, she claims the silver crown of her ancestors." The crown materialized in Elder Thorn's hands as if summoned by his words, an impossibly delicate circlet of silver set with moonstones that seemed to hold captured starlight. It was not a physical object that had been waiting in some treasure vault, Maya realized, but a manifestation of the power itself, the royal authority made visible. She knelt in the centre of the arena as Elder Thorn placed the crown upon her head, and felt the final piece of her transformation click into place. The silver crown settled onto her brow as if it had always belonged there, and power flowed through her in waves that made the very air shimmer with possibility. "Rise, Queen Maya of the Moon Crown," Elder Thorn commanded, and his voice carried to every corner of the arena. "Rise and claim your mate." Maya stood, silver crown blazing with inner light, and turned to face Damon. He stepped into the arena and dropped to one knee before her, his golden eyes filled with wonder and fierce devotion. "My queen," he said formally, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed crowd. "My mate, I offer myself to you freely, without reservation or political calculation. Will you have me?" Maya reached down and cupped his face in her hands, feeling the mate bond sing with completion between them. "I will have you," she said, and her voice carried the authority of absolute certainty. "As my king, as my partner, as my equal in all things." He rose and kissed her then, in front of the assembled multitude, and silver and gold light blazed around them like a living aurora. The crowd erupted in cheers and celebration, but Maya barely heard them. She was complete at last. Queen and mate, power and love, destiny finally claimed. But even as she revelled in the moment of triumph, her enhanced senses detected movement at the edge of the arena. Mounted warriors in foreign colours, their weapons gleaming in the afternoon sun. The invasion force had arrived during her coronation, thinking to catch her territory at its most vulnerable. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. The battle horns sounded across the territory like the voice of war itself. Maya stood on the steps of the arena, silver crown blazing with inner fire as she surveyed the enemy forces spreading across her lands like a dark tide. Hundreds of warriors in foreign colours, their weapons glinting in the fading sunlight, their war cries echoing off the surrounding hills. They had come expecting to face a weak territory caught off guard during a ceremonial gathering. They found a newly crowned queen instead. "How many?" Damon asked, his voice steady despite the overwhelming odds. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, golden eyes calculating distances and tactical advantages with the precision of a born war leader. 500, maybe more," Elder Thorn replied, his ancient face grim. "Representatives from at least 4 different territories, all united in their desire to prevent the Moon Crown from rising again." Maya felt the ancestral voices stirring in her mind, their whispers carrying the accumulated wisdom of queens who had faced similar challenges throughout the centuries. "This is what we were born for, little queen. This is why the bloodline endures. Show them what it means to face the Moon Crown in battle." Power flowed through Maya's veins like liquid starlight, and she felt her newly awakened abilities responding to the threat with eager anticipation. The girl who had once cowered from raised voices now stood ready to lead her people into combat against overwhelming odds. "Assemble our forces!" she commanded, her voice carrying clearly across the arena where her people still stood in shocked formation. "Every wolf capable of fighting, this ends today." The transformation that swept through the crowd was instantaneous. Celebration became preparation as warriors reached for weapons and wolves began shifting to their more powerful forms. But Maya could see the fear in their eyes, smell it in the air despite their brave postures. They were outnumbered nearly 3-1 by enemies who had come prepared for war. Maya stepped forward, silver light blazing brighter around her form, and her voice rose to carry across the entire territory. "People of the Moon Crown lands," she called out, and her words seemed to echo from the very stones beneath their feet. "Today you have witnessed the return of your true queen. Today you have seen the ancient bloodline reclaim its rightful place, and today you will see what it means to stand under the protection of the Moon Crown dynasty." She raised her hand, and silver fire erupted from her palm, visible for miles around. Every wolf in the territory felt the surge of royal power, felt their own abilities enhanced by proximity to their awakened queen. "I am Maya, heir to Queen Lyralee, daughter of the bloodline that has protected these lands since the world was young, and I will not allow foreign wolves to threaten what is mine." The roar of approval that rose from her people was deafening, but Maya was already moving, her strategic mind working through the tactical realities with startling clarity. The enemy had superior numbers, but they were fighting on unfamiliar ground against defenders who were now enhanced by her royal power. "Damon," she said, turning to her mate and king, "take half our forces and circle around to their eastern flank. Force them into the narrow pass where their numbers become a disadvantage." "And you?" he asked, though the golden fire in his eyes suggested he already knew the answer. Maya's smile was all predator. "I lead the centre charge. Let them see what they came here to kill." The next few minutes passed in a blur of strategic deployment and weapons preparation. Maya found herself moving through the organised chaos with the confidence of someone who had been born to command, issuing orders that were obeyed without question. The ancestral memories flowing through her consciousness provided tactical knowledge that spanned centuries of warfare. But it was Selena's unexpected approach that surprised her most. Her former rival limped forward, her golden hair still matted with blood from their combat trial, her blue eyes holding something Maya had never seen there before: respect. "My queen," Selena said formally, dropping to one knee despite her obvious pain, "I request permission to fight at your side." Maya studied her for a long moment, reading the sincerity in her battered features. "You were willing to kill me an hour ago." "An hour ago I was a fool, blinded by jealousy and ambition," Selena replied. "Now I see what you truly are, and I would rather die defending the rightful queen than live knowing I stood aside when she needed warriors." The redemption offered in those words sent warmth through Maya's chest. She extended her hand and helped Selena to her feet, silver light flowing between them in a gesture of forgiveness and acceptance. "Then fight beside me," Maya said, "and help me show these invaders what it costs to threaten the Moon Crown." The battle began at sunset, when the enemy forces finally committed to their assault. They came in waves, expecting to overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers and coordinated tactics. What they found instead was something that defied every military principle they understood. Maya led the central charge, her massive silver wolf form blazing with supernatural light as she carved through enemy ranks like a force of nature. Every movement was fluid perfection, every strike precisely calculated for maximum devastation. The ancestral power flowing through her enhanced not just her physical capabilities, but her tactical awareness, allowing her to anticipate enemy movements with uncanny accuracy. Around her, the defending wolves fought with capabilities they had never possessed before. Her royal presence enhanced their strength, their speed, their coordination, until they moved like extensions of her own will. Where Maya's light touched them, wounds healed faster, reflexes sharpened, and courage blazed brighter than fear. Damon's flanking maneuver caught the enemy forces exactly where Maya had predicted they would be vulnerable. His tactical brilliance complemented her supernatural enhancement perfectly, creating a devastating combination that turned numerical disadvantage into strategic dominance. Through their mate bond, they coordinated their attacks with wordless precision, each anticipating the other's moves with uncanny accuracy. Even Selena fought with renewed purpose, her natural combat skills enhanced by proximity to Maya's power. She moved through the battlefield like a golden whirlwind, protecting Maya's flanks and cutting down anyone who tried to approach their queen from behind. But it was Maya herself who became the stuff of legend that night. When the enemy commander, a massive alpha from the Northern Territories, challenged her to single combat in the centre of the battlefield, she met him without hesitation. Their battle raged across the blood-soaked ground, while both armies watched in fascination, alpha dominance clashing against royal authority in a contest that would determine the outcome of the entire war. Maya fought not just with her own strength, but with the accumulated power of every Moon Crown queen who had come before her. Ancient techniques flowed through her consciousness, battle strategies perfected over centuries of conflict. She was no longer just one wolf fighting for her territory. She was the living embodiment of a dynasty that had ruled when the world was young. When her claws finally found the enemy alpha's throat, when his lifeblood stained the ground beneath their feet, the remaining invaders broke and fled. They had come to kill a pretender queen, and instead found themselves facing the return of a bloodline that had once commanded the very forces of nature. Maya stood over the fallen commander, silver light blazing from her fur like captured moonfire, and let out a howl that echoed across the entire territory. It was a sound of triumph, of victory claimed through strength and will, of a queen who had defended her people against impossible odds. When the last of the enemy forces disappeared over the horizon, when the battlefield fell silent, except for the moans of the wounded, Maya shifted back to human form and surveyed what they had accomplished. Her people, wounded but victorious, exhausted but unbroken, looked at her with expressions of awe and fierce devotion. They had followed a newly crowned queen into battle against overwhelming odds, and she had led them to victory through sheer force of will and the power of her ancient bloodline. Damon approached her through the gathering darkness, his golden eyes reflecting the silver light that still pulsed from her skin. "My queen," he said, and his voice carried the weight of profound respect. "My magnificent, terrifying, absolutely unstoppable mate." Maya felt a smile tug at her lips, despite the exhaustion that was beginning to creep through her enhanced system. Was there ever any doubt? "Never," he replied, pulling her into his arms, despite the blood that stained them both. "Not from the moment I first saw you in that temple." Around them, the territory began the process of tending to their wounded and celebrating their impossible victory. But Maya's attention was already turning toward the future, toward the challenges that would come with rebuilding and ruling in a world that had been fundamentally changed by her return. The Moon Crown had defended its lands against foreign invasion. Now came the harder task of proving worthy of the crown through wisdom rather than warfare. But that was tomorrow's challenge. Tonight she was content to stand among her people as their victorious queen, her mate beside her, and her power blazing like a beacon against the darkness. The bloodline endured, and it would endure for generations to come. 3 months after the mate bond completed, Maya stood on the balcony of her royal chambers and watched the sun rise over lands that had been transformed beyond recognition. The territory that had once operated under rigid hierarchies and casual cruelty now thrived under a different kind of order, one based on merit rather than birth, on contribution rather than status. The changes hadn't happened overnight, but with each passing day, Maya had proven that true leadership meant lifting others up rather than keeping them down. She wore a simple morning gown of silver silk, the moon-crowned circlet resting on her brow with such natural grace that it seemed to have grown there. Her reflection in the glass doors showed a woman who bore little resemblance to the frightened servant who had once scrubbed temple floors. This Maya carried herself with quiet confidence, her silver eyes holding depths of wisdom that spoke of power earned rather than simply inherited. "Good morning, my queen." Damon's voice, warm with sleep and deeper emotions, made her turn with a smile that could have lit the entire kingdom. He approached her with the fluid grace that had first captured her attention, but now she could see the contentment in his golden eyes, the peace that came from finding his perfect match. "Good morning, my king," she replied, allowing him to wrap his arms around her from behind as they both gazed out over their shared domain. The landscape below them told the story of their reign. New buildings rose where old hovels had stood, constructed not just for function but for beauty. Gardens flourished where waste grounds had once festered, and everywhere wolves moved with purpose and dignity, no longer divided by arbitrary rankings that had nothing to do with their actual worth. "The council meeting went well yesterday," Damon murmured against her ear, his breath warm on her skin. "The Eastern Territories have agreed to the new trade accords." Maya leaned back against his solid warmth, marvelling at how natural this felt, ruling alongside someone who truly understood her, whose strengths complemented rather than competed with her own. "And the southern delegation?" "Impressed despite themselves," he replied with a hint of amusement. Apparently, they expected to find a barbarian kingdom run by an upstart pretender. Instead, they discovered the most efficiently administered territory in the known world. Pride flowed between them through their mate bond, but it wasn't the hollow satisfaction of vanity. It was the deeper contentment that came from building something worthwhile, something that would endure long after they were gone. Maya's hand drifted unconsciously to her still flat belly, where new life was already beginning to stir. The pregnancy was barely a month along, too early for anyone else to detect, but the enhanced senses that came with royal bloodline had made her aware of the change almost immediately. Damon's hand covered hers, and she felt his joy surge through their connection as he realized what her gesture meant. "How long have you known?" he asked, wonder threading through his voice. 2 weeks, Maya admitted, turning in his arms so she could see his face. I wanted to be certain before we started planning for the future of the bloodline." The smile that spread across his features was radiant enough to rival the sunrise. "Our child," he said, and the reverence in his voice made her chest tight with emotion. "The next generation of the Moon Crown dynasty." Maya felt the ancestral voices stirring in her mind, their whispers warm with approval and anticipation. The bloodline would continue, would grow strong under the protection of parents who had proven their worth through trial and triumph. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their kingdom wake to another day of peace and prosperity. In the distance, Maya could see Selena leading a training exercise for the younger wolves, her redemption complete through months of loyal service. The former pack princess had found her true calling as a teacher and protector, her natural combat skills put to use in building the next generation of defenders. Elder Thorn appeared in the garden below, his ancient form moving with surprising vitality as he tended to the medicinal herbs he cultivated for the territory's healers. He had been instrumental in the transition from old ways to new, his wisdom helping to bridge the gap between tradition and progress. "Do you ever regret it?" Damon asked quietly. "The life you could have had if your power had never awakened? The simple existence without the weight of a crown?" Maya considered the question seriously, as she did all matters that touched on duty and choice. But the answer came easily, flowing from a place of deep certainty. "How can I regret becoming who I was always meant to be?" she replied. "The girl who thought she was nothing was living a lie. This," she gestured to the thriving kingdom below, to the mate whose arms encircled her, to the new life growing within her. "This is the truth." She thought of the path that had brought her here, from the temple where she had first felt the stirring of her wolf to this balcony where she ruled as queen. Every moment of pain, every instant of doubt, every challenge that had seemed impossible to overcome, all of it had been necessary to forge her into someone strong enough to carry the weight of the Moon Crown. "I spent 18 years believing I was broken," Maya continued, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had become second nature. "Learning that I was simply waiting to be awakened changed everything. Not just about my power, but about my understanding of worth itself." Damon's arms tightened around her, and through their bond she felt his deep understanding. He had witnessed her transformation from invisible servant to radiant queen, had seen her claim her place in the world through strength and wisdom rather than birthright alone. "The children who come after us will never doubt their value," Maya said, one hand resting over the place where their heir was growing. "They'll be raised knowing that worth comes from within, that power is meant to protect rather than dominate." "And they'll have the strongest queen in history as their mother," Damon added, pressing a kiss to the crown of her head. "The woman who faced down armies and won through sheer force of will." Maya smiled at the memory of that night 3 months ago when enemy forces had thought to crush her newly claimed kingdom. They had learned, as all enemies of the Moon Crown eventually did, that some bloodlines were forged in fire and could not be broken by mere force. But it wasn't the battles she had won that defined her reign. It was the peace she had built afterward, the prosperity that flowed from justice rather than oppression. The real victory wasn't defeating those who challenged her power. It was proving worthy of that power through how she chose to use it. A soft knock at their chamber door interrupted her reflections. "Enter," Maya called, and a young servant girl appeared, one of many who now served with pride rather than fear. "Your Majesties," the girl said with a curtsy that held respect rather than subservience. "Elder Thorn requests your presence in the council chambers when convenient. The morning dispatches have arrived from the capital." "Thank you, Mira," Maya replied warmly, and the girl beamed at being addressed by name. It was a small thing, but in the old regime servants had been invisible. Under Maya's rule, every person mattered enough to be seen. After Mira departed, Maya remained on the balcony for a few moments longer, drinking in the sight of her thriving kingdom. The sun was fully risen now, painting the landscape in shades of gold that complemented the silver of her power perfectly. "Ready to begin another day of ruling the world?" Damon asked with gentle humour. Maya turned to face him fully, silver eyes meeting gold in perfect understanding. "With you beside me, I'm ready for anything." As they walked together toward the council chambers where the business of kingdom awaited, Maya felt a deep sense of completion that had nothing to do with power or position. She was exactly who she had always been meant to be, not despite the years of believing herself worthless, but because of them. The girl who had thought she was nothing had discovered she was everything, and in that discovery she had found not just her power, but her peace. Sometimes being broken open was the only way to discover you were never broken at all. The Moon-Crown dynasty would endure, carried forward by rulers who understood that true strength came not from the ability to dominate, but from the wisdom to lift others into the light. And in that understanding, Maya had found her happily ever after. The earth trembled beneath Maya's feet before she saw him. Power, raw, overwhelming, ancient power that made every wolf in the territory instinctively lower their heads and bare their throats in submission. Maya felt it wash over her like a crushing wave, driving her to her knees beside the temple altar where she had been arranging ceremonial flowers. The sacred moon relic on its pedestal began to pulse frantically, its silver light flickering like a candle in a hurricane. Then she saw the massive black wolf cresting the hill. Alpha King Damon was legend made flesh, his wolf form so enormous that the other pack wolves looked like puppies beside him. His midnight black fur seemed to absorb the afternoon sunlight, and when he moved, it was with the fluid grace of a predator who had never known defeat. Golden eyes swept across the assembled territory with casual dominance, and Maya watched grown alphas stumble backward under that gaze. The crowd that had gathered to welcome him pressed themselves against buildings and trees, creating a wide path as he padded down the main thoroughfare toward the temple. His presence was suffocating, magnificent, terrifying. This was what true power looked like. This was the wolf who would rule them all. Maya tried to make herself even smaller behind the altar, praying he would pass by without noticing her. She was nothing, invisible, forgettable. These mantras had always protected her before. But as the great black wolf approached the temple steps, something impossible happened. His massive head turned toward her hiding spot, and those ancient golden eyes locked onto hers with laser focus. Maya's breath caught in her throat. The world narrowed to that single moment of connection, and she felt something she had never experienced before: recognition. The Alpha King's wolf form went completely still, every muscle coiled with tension. His nostrils flared as he scented the air, and a low rumble built in his chest that was part growl, part whine. The sound sent shivers down Maya's spine and made the relic's pulsing intensify to an almost blinding degree. Around them, the pack watched in stunned silence as their legendary king appeared to fixate on the worthless temple servant. Maya could hear confused murmurs, feel the weight of dozens of stares, but she couldn't look away from those hypnotic golden eyes. Then Selena appeared at the temple entrance, resplendent in ceremonial robes of deep purple silk that marked her as the intended mate. Her beauty was breathtaking, her power undeniable, her political value immeasurable. Everything about her screamed queen. "My king," she said, her voice carrying the perfect blend of respect and invitation. "Welcome to our territory. I am Selena, daughter of Alpha Marcus, and I am honoured to—" But Damon's wolf form didn't even glance at her. His gaze remained fixed on Maya with an intensity that made her feel like she was burning from the inside out. The great wolf took another step closer, and Maya scrambled backward until her shoulders hit the stone altar. The moment her back touched the pedestal holding the moon relic, silver light exploded outward in all directions. The crowd gasped and shielded their eyes as the sacred crystal blazed like a captured star. Maya felt heat race down her spine and pool in her chest, and for one terrifying second she thought she heard something howling deep inside her mind. Damon's wolf threw back his massive head and released a sound that was pure alpha dominance mixed with something else, something that sounded almost like longing. The call echoed across the territory, and every wolf within miles felt it in their bones. When the silver light finally dimmed, Maya found herself staring up at a man instead of a wolf. The shift had happened so quickly she had barely registered the transformation. Damon stood before her in human form, tall and powerfully built, with the same golden eyes that had captured her so completely. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his face held the kind of rugged beauty that poets wrote about, but it was the expression in his eyes that stole her breath, confusion, wonder, and something that looked dangerously like recognition. "What is your name?" His voice was deep, commanding, but there was an undertone of something softer, something that made Maya's chest ache in ways she didn't understand. Maya," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He nodded slowly, as if her name confirmed something he had suspected. Then his gaze shifted to the still glowing relic behind her, and his expression darkened. "Interesting," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Selena cleared her throat pointedly, her perfect composure cracking just slightly around the edges. "My king, surely you must be tired from your journey. Perhaps we should retire to the great hall where—" "Later." The single word cut through her invitation like a blade. Damon's eyes never left Maya's face. "There are matters that require investigation first." Maya felt her cheeks burn with shame and confusion. Why was he looking at her like that? Why had the relic reacted so violently? And why did every instinct she possessed scream at her to either run toward him or run away? She couldn't tell which. The Alpha King studied her for another long moment, his golden gaze seeming to see straight through to her soul. Then he turned and strode away, leaving Maya shaking beside the altar while the pack erupted in whispered speculation. But as he reached the temple steps, he paused and looked back over his shoulder. When his eyes found hers again, Maya felt that same impossible recognition flare between them like lightning. Something was very wrong. Or perhaps, she thought, as she watched the most powerful wolf in existence disappear into the crowd, something was finally, impossibly right. The moon relic continued to pulse beside her, its silver light steady and sure, as if it knew secrets that Maya could barely begin to imagine. The temple felt different at night. Maya had always preferred the darkness, when the crowds dispersed and she could tend to her duties without enduring their stares and whispers. Tonight should have been no different. The moon relic sat on its pedestal, casting its usual soft silver glow across the empty stone chamber. She moved through her familiar routine of straightening ceremonial items and preparing for tomorrow's rituals, trying to lose herself in the comforting rhythm of work. But she couldn't stop thinking about those golden eyes. The cleaning cloth trembled in her hands as she approached the relic. Ever since this afternoon's encounter with the Alpha King, the sacred crystal had been behaving strangely. Its light seemed brighter, more insistent, and when she touched it, she could swear she felt warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Maya reached for the pendant with practiced care, but the moment her fingers made contact with its surface, silver light blazed outward like captured starlight. She gasped and nearly dropped it, but found she couldn't let go. The crystal was pulling at something deep inside her, something she had never known existed. "It responds to you." Maya spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. Alpha King Damon stood in the temple doorway, his massive frame silhouetted against the moonlight. He moved with that same fluid grace she had witnessed earlier, approaching her with the careful predatory steps of a hunter who didn't want to spook his prey. I'm sorry, Your Majesty," she stammered, immediately lowering her gaze to the floor. "I was just cleaning. I'll leave if you need the temple for—" "Look at me!" The command in his voice was impossible to resist. Maya raised her eyes reluctantly and immediately regretted it. Up close, Damon was even more overwhelming than she remembered. Power radiated from him in waves that made her skin prickle with awareness, and those golden eyes seemed to see straight through to her soul. "What are you?" he asked quietly. The question hit her like a physical blow. "Nobody," she whispered automatically. "I'm nobody important, just a servant who cleans the—" "That's not what I asked." He took another step closer, and Maya found herself backing against the altar until the relic's pedestal pressed into her spine. "Every instinct I possess is screaming that you're something more. My wolf—" He paused, running a hand through his dark hair in obvious frustration. "My wolf has never reacted to anyone the way it reacted to you today." Maya's chest tightened with something between hope and terror. "I don't understand what you mean." "Neither do I." His voice was rough, almost angry. "I came here to claim Selena as my mate. It's been arranged for months. Our territories need this alliance, and she's everything a queen should be. Powerful, beautiful, politically valuable." Each word felt like a knife between her ribs, but Maya forced herself to nod. Of course, what else had she expected? Damon moved closer still until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "But then I saw you, and everything changed." The relic in Maya's hands pulsed brighter, its silver light growing so intense that both of them had to squint. She tried to set it down, but her fingers wouldn't obey. The crystal seemed to be fusing with her skin, becoming part of her in ways that defied explanation. "What's happening?" she gasped. Damon's eyes widened as he watched the light pour from the relic and flow up Maya's arms like liquid silver. "I don't know, but I can feel it. Whatever you are, whatever this is." He reached toward her, his hand hovering just inches from her face. "My wolf recognizes you as—" He cut himself off abruptly, his expression tortured. "As what?" Maya whispered. "As mate." The word hung between them like a physical presence. Maya felt the relic's light surge brighter, and deep in her chest something stirred. Not her heart, not her lungs, but something else entirely. Something wild and fierce and desperately lonely. "That's impossible," she breathed. "I know." Damon's hand dropped to his side, but his gaze never left hers. "You have no wolf, no power, no bloodline worth mentioning. By every law of our kind, there's no way." The thing in Maya's chest snarled. The sound that escaped her throat was unlike anything she had ever made before. It was definitely not human, and it carried a dominance that made Damon take an involuntary step backward. His eyes flashed gold in response, his own wolf rising to meet the challenge. Maya clapped her hands over her mouth in horror, the relic finally slipping from her numb fingers to clatter on the stone floor. But instead of shattering, it blazed even brighter, its light now pulsing in rhythm with her racing heartbeat. "I have to go," she whispered, panic clawing at her throat. "This is wrong. All of this is wrong. You belong with Selena, and I—" "Maya." Her name on his lips stopped her mid-sentence. When she looked up, she found him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Something is happening here. Something bigger than political arrangements or social expectations. That sound you just made, wolves without power don't make sounds like that. "I don't have a wolf," she insisted, even as the wild thing in her chest continued to pace restlessly. "Everyone knows that. I've been tested. I'm defective." Damon crouched down and picked up the fallen relic. The moment it touched his skin, silver light exploded outward again, so bright that Maya had to shield her eyes. When it finally dimmed, she found him staring at the crystal with an expression of dawning understanding. "This isn't just any sacred relic," he said slowly. "It's a binding stone." "A what?" "They're incredibly rare. Ancient magic used to suppress power until the right moment." His golden eyes met hers with burning intensity. "Maya, what if you're not defective? What if you're something so powerful that someone felt the need to bind your abilities before you could access them?" The possibility hit her like a lightning strike. All her life she had accepted that she was broken, worthless, less than nothing. But what if it had all been a lie? What if she had been deliberately hidden, deliberately suppressed? What if she was exactly what she was supposed to be? The relic pulsed once more, and Maya felt the wild thing in her chest stretch and yawn like something waking from a very long sleep. For just a moment she could have sworn she heard a voice that sounded like her own, but fiercer, more ancient. Soon, it seemed to whisper. Very soon. Maya looked up at Damon, this legendary king who should have been beyond her reach, and saw her own confusion and wonder reflected in his golden eyes. Whatever was happening between them, whatever truth the relic was trying to reveal, there would be no going back to her old life of invisible servitude. The binding was beginning to crack, and Maya could feel something magnificent and terrible stirring beneath the surface of her carefully constructed nothingness. She was about to discover exactly what had been hidden inside her all along. Maya couldn't sleep. The encounter with Damon had left her mind spinning with impossible possibilities, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw silver light and felt the echo of that wild stirring in her chest. She had returned to her small servants' quarters in the basement of the main hall, but the familiar surroundings felt foreign now, as if she no longer belonged in the life she had always known. She was staring at the ceiling when the soft knock came at her door. Maya's heart leaped into her throat. No one ever visited her quarters. She was invisible, forgettable, unworthy of social calls. She considered pretending to be asleep, but something about the gentle persistence of the knocking made her reconsider. "Who is it?" she whispered. "Elder Thorn, I need to speak with you, child. It's about what happened tonight." Maya's blood ran cold. Elder Thorn was ancient even by wolf standards, his hair white as snow, and his pale eyes holding the wisdom of centuries. He was also one of the most respected wolves in the territory, keeper of the old knowledge and advisor to the Alpha Council. If he knew about her encounter with Damon... She opened the door with trembling fingers, and Elder Thorn stepped inside with surprising grace for someone his age. His weathered face was grave, and when his eyes met hers, she saw something that made her stomach clench with fear. Pity. "Sit down, Maya," he said gently, settling himself on the room's only chair while she perched nervously on the edge of her narrow bed. "We need to talk about the relic." "I didn't break it," she said quickly. "I know it was glowing strangely, but I was careful, I swear." "Child." His voice was infinitely kind. "You misunderstand. The relic isn't broken. It's awakening." Maya stared at him, confusion written across her face. "I don't know what that means." Elder Thorn was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those ancient eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "Tell me, what do you know about your parents?" "They were servants," Maya said automatically. "Loyal pack members who died in a hunting accident when I was very young. I was raised by the pack out of charity." "And you believe this because it's what everyone told you?" Something in his tone made Maya's chest tighten with dread. "Are you saying it isn't true? Maya, that relic you tend so carefully isn't just any sacred artifact. It's a royal binding stone created centuries ago by the most powerful wolf shamans in existence." He leaned forward, his pale eyes intense. "They're used for one purpose only, to suppress the power of royal bloodlines until they're ready to claim their inheritance." The words hit her like physical blows. "That's impossible. I'm nobody. I have no power, no wolf, no—" "Some cages are built to protect the world from what's inside," Elder Thorn interrupted softly, "and some are built to protect what's inside from the world." Maya's hands began to shake. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that everything you've been told about yourself is a lie." His voice was gentle but implacable. "Your parents weren't servants, child. They were the last surviving members of the Moon Crown dynasty, the most powerful royal bloodline in wolf history." The room seemed to tilt around Maya. She pressed her hands to her chest, where that wild thing had been stirring, and felt it respond to her touch with a pulse of recognition. The Mooncrown bloodline was thought to be extinct, Elder Thorn continued, hunted to near extinction by those who feared their power. When your parents realized they were carrying the last heir, they made a desperate choice. They bound your abilities with that relic and gave you a false identity, then died protecting the secret of what you truly are. But I've been tested, Maya whispered. Every young wolf is tested for their animal. I have nothing inside me. Because it's been sleeping, Elder Thorn said, bound by ancient magic that could only be triggered by the recognition of a true mate. His eyes softened with something like regret. I've been watching over you your entire life, waiting for the day when your power would begin to wake. I just never expected it to happen quite like this. Maya thought of Damon, of the way the relic had blazed when he touched it, of the impossible recognition that had passed between them. The Alpha King felt the call of your bloodline, even through the binding. Elder Thorn nodded. Royal wolves recognize their equals, even when those equals don't recognize themselves. The magnitude of what he was telling her crashed over Maya like a wave. She wasn't broken. She wasn't worthless. She was royal, she breathed. The most royal, Elder Thorn confirmed. The Mooncrown bloodline predates every other wolf family in existence. Their power was said to be God-touched, capable of commanding not just wolves, but the very forces of nature itself. Maya stood abruptly, pacing to the tiny window that looked out over the territory. In the distance, she could see the great hall where Alpha King Damon was presumably sleeping, where tomorrow he would begin the process of claiming Selena as his mate. The thought sent a spike of something fierce and possessive through her chest. This changes nothing, she said, turning back to Elder Thorn. Even if what you're saying is true, I'm still nobody. I still have no training, no knowledge of how to be what you claim I am, and Damon still needs to mate with Selena for the good of both territories. Elder Thorn's expression grew troubled. Maya, the binding isn't just weakening, it's beginning to break. What happened tonight with the relic was just the beginning. Your wolf is waking up, and when it fully emerges, he shook his head. The power you carry isn't something that can be ignored or suppressed much longer. What are you saying? I'm saying that denial won't change what you are, and others are beginning to notice the changes in you. His voice dropped to a whisper. Selena has been asking questions about your interaction with the Alpha King. She's not stupid, child, if she realizes what you represent. The threat hung unspoken between them, but Maya felt it like a cold wind across her skin. Selena had worked her entire life toward becoming queen. She wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatened that future. What am I supposed to do? Maya asked, and was horrified to hear how young and lost she sounded. Elder Thorn stood and moved to her side, placing a weathered hand on her shoulder. You have choices to make, and not much time to make them. The binding will continue to weaken whether you want it to or not. You can either learn to control what's coming, or you can let it control you. And if I choose to learn, then you'll discover what it truly means to be the heir to the Mooncrown. His pale eyes held hers steadily. But Maya, you need to understand. Some awakenings are gentle. Others, he paused meaningfully, others remake the world around them. He moved toward the door, then turned back one last time. The Alpha King feels the call of your bloodline because his wolf recognizes its equal. But recognition and acceptance are two different things. Even if he acknowledges what you are, there are forces in motion that won't simply step aside for destiny. After he left, Maya sank onto her bed and stared at her reflection in the small mirror across the room. The same unremarkable face looked back at her, the same forgettable features that had allowed her to remain invisible for 18 years. But now she knew the truth. She wasn't broken. She was deliberately hidden. And somewhere deep inside her, something ancient and powerful was stirring to wakefulness, tired of its long sleep and ready to reclaim everything that had been stolen from it. The Moon Crown bloodline was not extinct. It was simply waiting for the right moment to rise. Maya tried to return to her normal routine the next morning, but everything felt wrong. The knowledge of her true bloodline sat heavy in her chest like a stone, and every familiar task felt foreign under the weight of Elder Thorn's revelations. She moved through the temple mechanically, dusting surfaces that didn't need cleaning and arranging flowers that were already perfect, trying desperately to find comfort in the mundane duties that had once defined her existence. But she could feel eyes on her everywhere she went. Pack members who had never bothered to notice her before now watched her with curious speculation. Whispers followed in her wake, fragments of conversation about the Alpha King's strange behavior and the temple's unusual light display. Maya kept her head down and moved quickly, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully constructed invisibility was cracking. She was arranging candles around the altar when the temperature in the temple seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Well, well, the little temple mouse." Selena's voice was silk, wrapped around a blade, deceptively smooth, but cutting deep. Maya turned slowly, her hands still clutching a half-melted candle, to find the Pack Princess standing in the doorway. Selena looked magnificent as always, her golden hair catching the morning light and her ceremonial dress emphasizing every perfect curve. But there was something different about her expression today. Something cold and calculating that made Maya's newly awakened instincts scream danger. "Lady Selena," Maya managed, dropping into the submissive bow that had been drilled into her since childhood. "How may I serve you?" "Oh, I think you know exactly how you've been serving," Selena purred, gliding closer with predatory grace. "Or should I say, who you've been serving?" Maya's heart began to hammer against her ribs, but she kept her expression carefully neutral. "I don't understand." "Don't you?" Selena's perfect smile was razor-sharp. "Yesterday afternoon, our legendary Alpha King arrived to claim me as his mate. A political arrangement that has been in place for months, and yet, somehow, he seemed far more interested in staring at the worthless little servant girl than acknowledging his future queen." Each word was a calculated blow designed to cut and humiliate. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks, but something else rose with it, something fierce and protective that made her spine straighten almost against her will. "I'm sure you're mistaken," Maya said quietly. "The Alpha King has no reason to notice someone like me." "That's exactly what I thought." Selena moved even closer until Maya could smell her expensive perfume and see the cold fury burning in her blue eyes. "But then I heard the most interesting rumors about strange lights in the temple last night, about sounds that shouldn't come from someone without a wolf." Maya's blood turned to ice. How much did Selena know? How much had she seen? "You know what I think?" Selena continued, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I think you're playing some kind of game. Maybe you've convinced yourself that because you clean his precious sacred artifacts, you somehow matter. Maybe you've even deluded yourself into thinking you have a chance with him." The wild thing in Maya's chest snarled, and she had to bite her tongue to keep the sound from escaping her throat. But Selena noticed the slight change in her posture, the way Maya's hands had curled into fists at her sides. "Oh, you do think that, don't you?" Selena's laugh was like breaking glass. "How pathetic. Let me explain something to you, little mouse. I am everything you will never be. I have power, beauty, bloodline, political value. I was bred to be a queen. You?" Her eyes raked over Maya's plain servant's dress with obvious disgust. "You were bred to scrub floors and fade into the background." Maya felt something crack inside her chest, but it wasn't her heart breaking. It was something else entirely. Something that had been held back by 18 years of learned helplessness and carefully constructed self-hatred. "You think someone like him could want someone like you?" Selena's voice turned venomous. "You're nothing, Maya. You've always been nothing, and you will always be nothing. The sooner you accept that and stop interfering with your betters, the better off everyone will be. That's when Maya felt it, a golden thread of warmth that seemed to stretch from her chest toward the great hall where Damon was staying. The sensation was so sudden and intense that she gasped, her hand flying to her heart. Through that impossible connection, she could feel emotions that weren't her own, frustration, longing, and something that felt remarkably like protectiveness directed at her. Selena's eyes narrowed as she watched Maya's reaction. What was that? What just happened to you? Nothing, Maya lied, but the golden thread pulsed stronger, bringing with it a flood of sensations that definitely weren't her own. She could feel Damon's wolf pacing restlessly, agitated by something he couldn't quite identify. Could feel his human side fighting against instincts he didn't understand. He was feeling her distress. Somehow, impossibly, he was connected to her emotions, just as she was connected to his. "You're lying." Selena's voice was deadly quiet now. "Something is happening here, something that threatens everything I've worked for." She stepped so close that Maya could feel her breath against her cheek. "Let me make this very clear, little mouse. Tomorrow night I will be mated to the Alpha King in front of the entire territory. I will become his queen and the mother of his heirs, and you will remain exactly what you've always been, nobody." The golden thread in Maya's chest blazed brighter, and she felt an answering surge of fury that definitely came from Damon. His wolf didn't like that she was being threatened. Didn't like it at all. "But just to make sure you don't get any more foolish ideas," Selena continued, her smile turning predatory, "let me give you a warning. If I see you anywhere near the Alpha King again, if you so much as look in his direction during tomorrow's ceremony, I will make sure you disappear. Permanently." The threat was subtle but unmistakable, delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who had never been denied anything she wanted. Maya felt her newly awakened wolf rise in response, a snarl building in her throat that would have shocked them both. But before she could react, the golden thread connecting her to Damon suddenly blazed with such intensity that she staggered backward. Through their impossible bond, she felt his wolf surge to the surface with protective fury, felt his human form struggle to contain the beast that wanted to tear apart anything threatening its mate. Mate. The word echoed through their connection like a bell, and Maya realized with dawning horror that whatever was happening between them was growing stronger. Every moment of denied connection only made the pull more intense. Selena must have seen something in Maya's expression that alarmed her, because her perfect composure cracked just slightly. "Stay away from him," she hissed. "Whatever game you think you're playing, it ends now. You are nothing, and you will remain nothing, or I will make sure you regret the day you were born." After Selena swept out of the temple, Maya sank to her knees beside the altar, shaking with emotions she couldn't name. The golden thread connecting her to Damon pulsed with his lingering anger and her own desperate confusion. She was no longer the invisible servant who had learned to accept cruelty as her due. Something inside her was waking up, something that refused to bow before threats and intimidation, something that recognized its own worth regardless of what others chose to see. But Selena was right about one thing. Tomorrow night's ceremony would change everything. Either Maya would find the courage to claim her true identity, or she would watch the man her soul recognized as mate bind himself to another forever. The golden thread pulsed once more, carrying with it a sensation that felt remarkably like a promise. Whatever happened, she wouldn't face it alone. Her wolf was coming, and it would not be caged much longer. Maya couldn't stay. The thought had been building in her mind all day, growing stronger with each passing hour as tomorrow's ceremony loomed closer. Selena's threat echoed in her ears, but it wasn't fear of the Pack Princess that drove her toward the desperate decision to flee. It was the golden thread connecting her to Damon that pulsed stronger with every breath, the impossible pull that made her chest ache with longing she had no right to feel. She couldn't watch him mate with another. She simply couldn't. As midnight approached, Maya gathered her few belongings into a worn travelling pack. A change of clothes, some dried food from the kitchens, and the small knife that had been her mother's, or the woman she had believed was her mother. Everything else she would leave behind, including the life that had never truly been hers anyway. But as she reached for the door, something stopped her cold. The moon relic was calling to her. Maya pressed her hands to her ears, trying to block out the impossible sensation, but it wasn't a sound she was hearing. It was a pull, ancient and insistent, that seemed to come from the very centre of her being. The binding stone that had suppressed her power for 18 years was somehow reaching across the territory, demanding her attention with increasing urgency. "I can't," she whispered to the empty room. "I have to leave. I have to get away before—" The pull intensified, and Maya found herself stumbling toward the door despite her best intentions. Her feet carried her through the darkened halls and out into the moonlit courtyard, drawn by a compulsion she couldn't resist. The temple loomed ahead of her, its ancient stones silvered by starlight, and she could see an ethereal glow emanating from within. The relic was blazing. Maya pushed through the temple doors to find the sacred crystal pulsing with light so bright it was almost painful to look at directly. But she couldn't look away. The binding stone seemed to recognize her presence, its illumination shifting from silver to gold to something that looked almost like flame. "Maya!" She spun around to find Damon standing in the doorway, his golden eyes reflecting the relic's light like a wolf's in the darkness. He looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept, and his dark hair was dishevelled as though he'd been running his hands through it in frustration. "You were leaving." It wasn't a question. Somehow, through their impossible connection, he had felt her intentions. "I have to," she whispered. "Tomorrow you'll be mated to Selena, and I can't watch that happen." He moved closer, and Maya felt the golden thread between them thrum with tension. "Do you think I want to watch you leave?" The raw pain in his voice made her chest tighten. "You have no choice. Your people need this alliance, and Selena—" "Selena isn't my mate." The words exploded from him with such force that the relic's light flared brighter. "My wolf knows the difference, even if my mind doesn't understand it. Every instinct I possess screams that you're the one I'm supposed to claim." Maya shook her head desperately. "That's impossible. I'm nobody. I have nothing to offer a king." "Stop saying that." Damon's voice was rough with frustration. "Stop diminishing yourself. Don't you feel what's happening between us? This connection that defies every law of our kind?" Maya did feel it. The golden thread that bound them was singing now, vibrating with an intensity that made her bones ache. But feeling it and accepting it were two different things. "It doesn't matter what I feel," she said, tears burning her eyes. "You have duties, responsibilities. I won't be the reason you abandon your people. And I won't let you run away from what we are." Damon closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Maya, whatever this is, whatever force brought us together, we can't ignore it." The moment his skin touched hers, the relic behind them exploded with light. But this time, Maya felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart, but the binding that had held her power captive for so long. Silver light poured from the crystal and wrapped around them both like living flame. "Damon, don't!" Maya tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "I'm done pretending this doesn't exist," he said fiercely. "I'm done trying to convince myself that duty matters more than—" His power lashed out in a surge of frustrated emotion, and Maya heard the sharp crack of breaking crystal. They both turned in horror to see the moon relic splitting down the centre, silver light pouring from the fracture like blood from a wound. The binding stone that had contained Maya's power for 18 years was finally, irreversibly breaking. "No," Maya breathed, but it was too late. The moment the relic shattered completely, agony unlike anything Maya had ever experienced crashed through her body. power that had been compressed and contained for nearly 2 decades flooded her system all at once, and she screamed as her bones began to crack and reform. "Maya!" Damon caught her as she collapsed, but she could barely hear him over the roaring in her ears. Her spine was elongating, her face pushing forward into something that wasn't quite human. The transformation that should have happened gradually over years was being compressed into moments. Silver light poured from her skin as her wolf fought its way to the surface with violent desperation. She could feel her consciousness splitting, expanding, as something ancient and powerful awakened inside her mind. "Welcome home, little sister," a voice that was her own, but older, fiercer, whispered inside her head. "We have been waiting so very long." Maya's vision went white as her body completed its shift, and when it cleared, she found herself looking at the world through different eyes, wolf eyes. She could smell everything, Damon's fear and wonder, the lingering traces of every person who had entered the temple in the past month, the scent of her own power that hung in the air like ozone after lightning. But it was her reflection in the temple's polished surfaces that stole her breath. Her wolf form was massive, nearly as large as Damon's, with fur that gleamed silver-white like captured moonlight. Ancient power radiated from her in waves that made the remaining sacred objects in the temple hum with resonance. This wasn't the wolf of a servant or even a noble. This was the wolf of a queen. Damon shifted beside her, his own transformation swift and controlled, and when his great black wolf approached her silver one, Maya felt recognition snap into place like a key turning in a lock. Not just recognition, completion. The missing piece of herself that she had never known was missing. "Mate," her wolf sang, and his answered with a harmony that made the very air around them shimmer. They stood there in their wolf forms, silver and black, light and shadow, two halves of something that had been torn apart and was finally whole again. The golden thread that had connected them as humans was now a blazing cord of light that bound their souls together with unbreakable certainty. When they shifted back to human form, Maya found herself in Damon's arms, both of them breathing hard from the intensity of what had just happened. But she felt different now, stronger, complete in a way she had never been before. "The Mooncrown bloodline," Damon whispered, his golden eyes wide with awe. "You're not just royal, Maya. You're the most powerful wolf born in centuries." Maya looked down at her hands, which were still glowing faintly with silver light, and realized that the frightened, invisible girl she had been was gone forever. In her place stood someone who could command the very forces of nature, someone whose wolf sang with the voices of ancient queens. The relic lay in pieces around them, its purpose finally fulfilled. The binding was broken, the power released, and Maya was no longer the nobody who cleaned floors and faded into shadows. She was exactly who she had always been meant to be, and she would never hide again. The awakening was only the beginning. Maya thought the transformation was complete when her wolf emerged, but she was wrong. Power continued to flood through her body in waves, each surge more intense than the last. Silver light poured from her skin like liquid starlight, and the very air around her began to shimmer with supernatural energy. The ground beneath her feet trembled. "Maya!" Damon's voice seemed to come from very far away, though he was standing right beside her. "You need to breathe! You need to control!" But Maya could barely hear him over the roaring in her head. Her newly awakened wolf was drunk on freedom, revelling in power that had been suppressed for so long it felt like drowning in reverse. Instead of losing air, she was gaining it, more and more, until her lungs might burst with the sheer intensity of being fully alive for the first time. The temple windows exploded outward in a shower of coloured glass. Maya gasped and tried to pull the power back, but it was like trying to contain an ocean with her bare hands. Energy crackled along her skin in silver arcs, and when she looked down at her palms, she could see light pulsing beneath the surface like captured lightning. "I can't stop it," she whispered, terror threading through her voice. "Damon, I can't make it stop." More objects began to vibrate in response to her distress. The remaining candles on the altar flickered and went out, then blazed back to life with flames twice their normal size. Ancient carvings on the temple walls began to glow, as if responding to the presence of their long-lost queen. And then Maya heard the voices. They started as whispers at the edge of her consciousness, but quickly grew stronger, clearer. Dozens of them, all speaking in unison, all welcoming her home. "You are awake at last, little queen. We have waited so long to see you claim your birthright. The power of our bloodline flows through you now." "Who are you?" Maya gasped, pressing her hands to her temples as the voices grew louder. "Your ancestors," came the reply, warm with ancient love. "The queens who came before you, whose power now lives in your blood. We are the Moon Crown dynasty, and we have been sleeping in your soul, waiting for the binding to break." Maya's knees gave out, and Damon caught her before she could hit the stone floor. But even his steady presence couldn't ground her, as the full magnitude of her inheritance crashed over her in waves. She could feel them all, generations of wolf queens whose power had been passed down through bloodlines until it reached her. Rulers who had commanded not just packs, but entire kingdoms. Women who had shaped the very landscape with their will and protected their people with magic that bordered on divine. "Use our strength, little one," the voices urged. "Let us show you what you truly are." Power erupted from Maya in a pulse that shattered every remaining piece of glass in the temple. The wave of energy spread outward like ripples on a pond, and through her enhanced senses she could feel it washing over the entire territory. Every wolf within miles suddenly lifted their heads in recognition, their beasts stirring with an instinctive need to submit to a power greater than any they had ever encountered. In the great hall, where the pack elite had gathered for pre-ceremony discussions, conversations died mid-sentence as pure alpha dominance crashed over them like a tidal wave. Maya felt their shock, their awe, their sudden desperate need to find the source of such overwhelming authority. Through the golden thread binding her to Damon, she could sense his wonder and fierce pride. His wolf was singing with recognition, not fear or submission, but the joy of finally finding its equal. "That's it," he murmured against her ear, his arms still supporting her shaking form. "Don't fight it. Let it flow through you." But Maya wasn't sure she had a choice. The power was using her as much as she was using it, reshaping her from the inside out. She could feel her body changing on a cellular level, growing stronger, faster, more resilient. Her senses expanded until she could hear heartbeats from across the territory, smell the fear and excitement of dozens of wolves, feel the very pulse of the earth beneath the temple foundations. Another wave of energy poured out of her, and this time it carried intention. Every wolf in the territory, from the highest-ranking alpha to the lowest omega, suddenly felt the undeniable compulsion to come to her, to witness, to acknowledge. Maya's silver eyes snapped open, and for the first time in her life, she looked at the world with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was: royal, powerful, magnificent. The temple doors burst open as the first of the pack members arrived, drawn by the supernatural summons they couldn't resist. Elder Thorn appeared in the doorway, his ancient face filled with awe and something that looked like relief. "The moon crown rises," he whispered, then dropped to one knee. "Long live the queen." Behind him, more wolves poured into the temple. Warriors, nobles, servants, all of them feeling the same irresistible pull. One by one, they saw Maya standing in her halo of silver light and fell to their knees in recognition of what she had become. Maya felt their submission wash over her like a warm tide, and her wolf preened with satisfaction. This was right. This was what she had been born for. Not to serve, but to be served. Not to hide, but to lead. but it was Selena's arrival that truly tested the extent of her newfound power. The Pack Princess appeared in the temple entrance like a vision of golden fury, her perfect face twisted with rage and disbelief. She took one look at Maya surrounded by her court of kneeling subjects and let out a snarl of pure hatred. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the reverent silence. "Some kind of trick? Some pathetic attempt to—" Her words died in her throat as Maya turned the full force of her attention on her rival. Silver eyes met blue ones across the crowded temple, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop by degrees. Maya didn't speak. She didn't need to. The power radiating from her said everything that needed to be said. Selena took an involuntary step backward, her wolf whimpering in submission, even as her human pride fought against the impulse. Maya could smell her fear, sharp and acrid, cutting through her expensive perfume like a blade. "Impossible," Selena whispered, but her voice shook with the force of trying to resist Maya's dominance. "You're nobody. You're nothing. You can't be—" "Bow." The single word emerged from Maya's throat with such absolute authority that even Damon felt the compulsion to drop his head in submission. It wasn't a request or a suggestion. It was a command backed by centuries of royal power, delivered with the full weight of her awakened bloodline. Selena fought it for perhaps 3 seconds before her knees buckled and she crashed to the temple floor in unwilling submission. The sound of her defeat echoed through the stone chamber, and Maya felt a surge of satisfaction so intense it was almost intoxicating. The nobody they had scorned was the most powerful wolf any of them had ever seen. Standing there in her silver light, surrounded by the prostrate forms of wolves who had once dismissed her as worthless, Maya finally understood what Elder Thorn had meant about awakenings that remade the world around them. She wasn't just claiming her power, she was claiming her throne, and anyone who stood in her way would learn exactly what it meant to challenge the returned Moon Crown dynasty. The silence that followed Selena's submission stretched like a held breath. Maya stood in the center of the temple, silver light still pulsing from her skin in gentle waves, and felt the weight of dozens of stares. Every wolf in the territory seemed to have answered her supernatural summons, cramming into the sacred space until there was barely room to breathe. But none of them dared speak. None of them dared move. They were waiting for her to tell them what came next. The realization hit Maya with startling clarity. She was no longer someone who received orders. She was someone who gave them. The shift in power dynamics was so complete, so absolute, that she almost laughed at the impossibility of it all. 24 hours ago, she had been scrubbing floors and accepting cruelty as her due. Now, wolves who had tormented her for years knelt at her feet in terrified reverence. "Rise," she said finally, her voice carrying easily through the crowded temple, despite its soft tone. The single word held such natural authority that every wolf immediately scrambled to obey, though none of them dared lift their eyes to meet hers. Elder Thorn stepped forward from the crowd, his ancient face glowing with something that looked like profound relief. "Maya of the Moon Crown," he said formally, his voice carrying the weight of ritual. "The blood of queens flows in your veins. The power of your ancestors burns in your soul. By right of birth and strength of spirit, you claim your place as the rightful heir to the Moon Crown dynasty," Maya finished, and was surprised by how easily the words came. As if her tongue had always known them, had simply been waiting for the binding to break so she could speak her truth aloud. "I am the daughter of Queen Lyrily and King Theron, the last of my bloodline, and I reclaim what was stolen from my family generations ago." A ripple of shock ran through the assembled wolves. Many of them were old enough to remember the stories of the Moon Crown royalty, the legendary bloodline that had ruled with wisdom and power before disappearing into myth. To have that bloodline standing before them, awakened and blazing with ancestral magic, was like witnessing the return of the gods themselves. But it was Damon's reaction that mattered most to Maya. She could feel his emotions through their completed bond: awe, pride, and something deeper, that made her chest warm with golden light. When she turned to look at him, she found his golden eyes fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. "My queen," he said, and the title on his lips sent shivers down her spine. But then he stepped closer, close enough that only she could hear his next words. "My mate." The acknowledgement of their bond, spoken aloud in front of witnesses, sent another pulse of silver light through the temple. Maya felt the mating connection snap fully into place, no longer a tentative thread but a blazing cord that bound their souls together with unbreakable certainty. "The political arrangement," someone called from the crowd, one of the visiting dignitaries who had come for tomorrow's ceremony. "The alliance between territories. What becomes of—" "The alliance stands," Maya said, her voice cutting through the nervous murmur that had begun to build. "But it will be sealed through the true pairing, not the false one that was planned." She could feel Selena's fury radiating from where the former Pack Princess knelt on the temple floor, her perfect composure shattered beyond repair. But Maya also sensed something else from her former tormentor: fear, deep, bone-crushing terror that made the other woman's wolf whimper in submission. "You cannot simply—" Selena began, her voice shaking with barely contained rage. "I can do whatever I wish," Maya interrupted, and her words carried such absolute certainty that Selena's protest died in her throat. "I am the Moon Crown heir. My bloodline predates every wolf family in existence, and my power answers to no authority but my own will." To demonstrate her point, Maya allowed a fraction of her ancestral magic to flow outward. Ancient power filled the temple like a visible presence, making the air itself shimmer with silver light. Every wolf in the room felt it, the weight of centuries, the accumulated strength of a dozen queen mothers, the raw force of nature itself bent to royal will. It was Elder Thorn who spoke the words that everyone was thinking. "The Moon Crown has returned," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "The greatest bloodline in wolf history walks among us once again." Maya felt the truth of those words settle into her bones like a homecoming. This was what she had been born for, not to serve, but to lead. Not to hide her light, but to let it blaze until it illuminated every dark corner of the world. "There will be changes," she continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the packed temple. "The old ways that allowed cruelty to flourish in shadows will be swept away. No wolf in this territory will suffer as I suffered, dismissed and diminished for circumstances beyond their control." She could see the hope that bloomed in the eyes of the Omega wolves, the servants, the ones who had lived their lives at the bottom of the hierarchy. For the first time, they were seeing someone who understood their struggles, someone who had walked their path and emerged with the power to change everything. But Maya's attention was drawn to a disturbance at the edge of the crowd. Several wolves were pushing through the assembled pack members with urgent expressions, and she could smell the scent of fear and excitement clinging to their fur. "Your Majesty," one of them called out. A scout, she realized, his clothes dusty from hard travel. "We bring word from the border territories. News of your awakening has already begun to spread." Maya felt Damon stiffen beside her, his protective instincts flaring. Through their bond, she could sense his sudden alertness, the way his mind immediately turned to potential threats. "What news?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew. "Other territories are mobilizing," the scout reported, his voice heavy with implication. "Some to offer allegiance to the returned Moon Crown, but others—" He swallowed hard. "Others speak of false queens and pretenders. There are those who remember the old stories, who fear what your bloodline represents." Maya felt a cold smile touch her lips. Of course there would be resistance. Power like hers didn't emerge in a vacuum. It shifted the balance of everything, threatened established orders that had grown comfortable in the absence of true royalty. "Let them come," she said, and her voice carried the confidence of someone who had finally found her true strength. "Let them test themselves against the Moon Crown and discover what their ancestors learned centuries ago." Silver light pulsed from her skin in rhythm with her heartbeat, and Maya felt the ancestral voices whispering their approval in the back of her mind. "You were born for this, little queen," they murmured, "born to reclaim what was stolen, to restore what was lost. The bloodline endures, and through you it will rise again." Maya looked out over the sea of faces, some afraid, some hopeful, all of them recognizing that the world had fundamentally changed in the space of a single night. Tomorrow's ceremony would proceed as planned, but not with Selena as the bride. The moon crown would claim its rightful mate, and anyone who sought to stand in their way would learn exactly what it meant to challenge destiny itself. The awakening was complete. Now the real work could begin. They came for her in the pre-dawn darkness. Maya's newly awakened senses detected them long before they reached her chambers. The scent of foreign wolves, the whisper of weapons being drawn, the careful footsteps of trained assassins moving through corridors they shouldn't know. Her wolf stirred to alertness, silver power flowing through her veins like liquid lightning. She was no longer the helpless servant who would have cowered under her blankets and hoped to remain invisible. The first arrow shattered her window and embedded itself in the wall where her head would have been if she'd still been sleeping. Maya rolled from the bed in one fluid motion, her enhanced reflexes carrying her behind the heavy wooden dresser, just as two more arrows whistled through the air. "Poisoned," her wolf informed her with clinical precision. "Nightshade and something else, meant to kill quickly." Maya's lips curved in a cold smile. They had no idea what they were dealing with. Power flooded through her system as she shifted partially, allowing her wolf strength to enhance her human form without fully transforming. Silver light began to emanate from her skin, and she could feel the ancestral voices rising in her mind like a battle song. "Show them what the moon crown is capable of, little queen. Show them why our enemies learned to fear the night." The door to her chambers exploded inward as black-clad figures poured through the entrance. Maya counted 6 of them, all armed, all moving with the deadly precision of professional killers. They spread out to surround her, crossbows and silver-edged blades gleaming in the moonlight streaming through her broken window. "The false queen dies tonight," one of them growled, his accent marking him as foreign. "The natural order will not be disrupted by pretenders." Maya stood slowly, silver light pulsing from her skin in waves that made the assassin's eyes water. "The only thing false here," she said, her voice carrying the authority of centuries, "is your belief that you can kill what cannot die." The leader gestured, and they attacked as one. Maya moved like liquid silver, her partially shifted form granting her speed and strength that bordered on supernatural. The first assassin lunged at her with a poisoned blade, but she caught his wrist and twisted until bones snapped like dry wood. His scream was cut short as she drove her other hand into his throat with lethal precision. The second attacker fired his crossbow, but Maya was no longer where the bolt expected to find her. She had flowed around the projectile like water, closing the distance between them before he could reload. Her claws, fully extended now, raked across his chest, and he fell in a spray of crimson. Through the golden thread connecting her to Damon, she felt his sudden alertness, his wolf responding to her surge of combat adrenaline. He was coming, she realized, drawn by their mate bond across the territory like a lodestone. But she wouldn't wait for rescue. She didn't need rescue. A third assassin came at her from behind, thinking to catch her unaware while she dealt with his companions. Maya spun and caught the descending blade between her palms, her enhanced strength stopping the strike cold. Silver light blazed from her hands, and the metal began to glow red-hot. The assassins screamed and tried to pull away, but Maya held fast. Power flowed through her like molten silver, and she felt the ancient magic of her bloodline responding to the threat. The sword cracked, then shattered, leaving the would-be killer staring at her in shock. "Impossible," he breathed. "For you, perhaps," Maya replied, then struck him with enough force to send him crashing through the wall into the next room. The remaining 3 assassins had regrouped, fear replacing their initial confidence. Maya could smell their terror, sharp and acrid, cutting through the metallic scent of blood that now painted her chambers. "She's not human," one of them whispered. "None of the reports mentioned this kind of power," another added, his voice shaking. Maya smiled, and her expression was all predator. "Your intelligence was incomplete. I am the Moon Crown heir, daughter of a bloodline that ruled when your ancestors were still learning to walk upright. Did you really think you could end me with mortal weapons?" She took a step toward them, silver light blazing brighter with each heartbeat. The ancestral power flowing through her was intoxicating, singing in her blood like a drug. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be truly alive. The remaining assassins broke and ran. Maya let them go, not out of mercy, but because she wanted survivors to carry word back to whoever had sent them. Let the other territories know what they faced. Let them understand that the Moon Crown had returned in its full glory, wielded by someone who would not be cowed or controlled. She was examining the poisoned arrows when Damon burst through her ruined door, his wolf form shedding to human as he took in the carnage. His golden eyes swept over the broken bodies, the destroyed furniture, the silver light still pulsing from Maya's skin, and something primitive and possessive blazed in his expression. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. "No," Maya said, allowing him to pull her into his arms despite the blood on her hands. They underestimated what they were facing. Through their bond, she felt his relief, his fierce pride, and something deeper, a recognition that the woman he had claimed as mate was no fragile flower who needed protection. She was a queen who could defend herself, and anyone foolish enough to threaten her. "This was coordinated," Damon said, his voice rough with barely contained fury. "Multiple territories working together to eliminate you before you could consolidate power." Maya nodded, her mind already working through the implications. "They're afraid. The return of the Moon Crown threatens every established power structure. Some will submit, but others—" She looked at the dead assassins, her expression hardening. "Others will try to extinguish what they cannot control. Let them try." Damon's voice was a growl of pure alpha dominance. "Let them all try. They'll learn what it means to threaten my mate." More footsteps echoed in the corridor as pack warriors arrived, drawn by the sounds of combat. Maya could hear Elder Thorn's voice among them, directing the cleanup and investigation. But she was more interested in the way Damon was looking at her, not with shock or horror at the violence she had unleashed, but with recognition. He saw her clearly now, perhaps for the first time, not the broken servant girl who needed rescuing, but the powerful queen who could stand beside him as an equal. The realization sent warmth flowing through their mate bond, and Maya felt her wolf purr with satisfaction. "This is only the beginning," she said quietly, allowing him to help her clean the blood from her hands. "If they're willing to send assassins now, what will they do when they realize diplomacy has failed?" "Then we'll be ready," Damon replied, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "The Moon Crown doesn't stand alone anymore." Maya looked out through her broken window at the territory spread below, at the lands that were now hers to protect and rule. Somewhere out there, enemies were gathering, plotting, preparing for war against what they saw as a false queen and pretender to power. They would discover their mistake too late. The girl who had once scrubbed floors and endured cruelty was gone forever. In her place stood a queen who had tasted battle and found it sweet, who had faced death and emerged victorious, and she was just getting started.